I never imagined that standing outside a homeless shelter with my daughter on a freezing morning would be the moment my entire world shifted. But when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb and my grandmother stepped out, everything I thought I understood about my family began to unravel. Let me take you back to that morning, getting a 6. You're old ready for school while living in emergency housing is an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's chaos wrapped in shame, and you're doing it all while trying to keep your child from realizing how badly things have fallen apart. That particular morning, we couldn't find Emma's matching sock. She looked up at me with those careful eyes, the ones that said she was trying to be brave for both of us. "It's fine, Mom," she whispered. "I can wear 2 different ones." She held up a pink sock decorated with unicorns and a dingy white one that had seen better days. I stared at those socks like they represented every failure I was carrying. "That's a bold fashion statement," I told her, forcing lightness into my voice, very confident. She smiled, and for just a heartbeat, I forgot where we were. Then the shelter door swung open behind us, and the bitter winter air reminded me exactly where we stood. We were outside Sacred Heart Family Shelter at 6 in the morning. The sky hung gray and bruised above us. Everything smelled metallic and sharp, like the cold itself was scrubbing away any warmth that tried to exist. Emma adjusted the backpack that dwarfed her small frame while I zipped up her puffy jacket, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the sign hanging over the entrance. The word that haunted me wasn't shelter. It was family, as if we'd become a category, a statistic, a label someone stuck on a filing cabinet. "Okay," I said, painting brightness over my exhaustion. "School bus will be here in 5 minutes." Emma nodded with that quiet courage that simultaneously made me proud and broke my heart. Then she asked softly, "Do I still have to tell people my address when Miss Turner asks?" My stomach twisted. "I don't think she'll ask today," I answered, praying that was true. Emma didn't argue. She just looked down at her mismatched shoes, then back up at my face like she was memorizing it. Like she needed to confirm I was still the same person. "Mom," she said carefully, "are we going to move again?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. That's when everything changed. A black sedan glided to the curb with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't belong anywhere near Sacred Heart. Not a rideshare, not a taxi. This was the kind of vehicle that only appeared in this neighborhood by mistake. The door opened, and my grandmother emerged wearing a tailored coat the color of midnight. Catherine Monroe. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and that gap felt significant because my life had split cleanly into before everything collapsed and after. She existed firmly in the before. She looked exactly as I remembered, composed, elegant, intimidating in a way that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with quiet power. The kind of woman who once ended a corporate negotiation by raising a single eyebrow. Her gaze found me first. I watched recognition dawn, then confusion, then her eyes shifted to Emma. Something cracked across her expression, quick and sharp like fracturing glass. She looked up at the shelter sign, then back at me, and when she spoke, my name sounded strange in her mouth. "Olivia," she said slowly, "what are you doing here?" Every instinct I had screamed at me to lie, not because I thought she'd judge me, but because being truly seen in that moment felt unbearable. "I'm fine," I said automatically, deploying the universal lie of exhausted women everywhere. "We're managing. It's only temporary." Catherine's eyes traveled down to Emma's mismatched socks, then to my hands, raw and chapped from too much hand sanitizer, too much cold, too much barely surviving. Her voice dropped lower. "Olivia," she repeated, "why aren't you living in the house on Riverside Drive?" The ground tilted beneath me. I blinked at her, certain I'd heard wrong. My what? She didn't repeat herself like I was slow. She repeated herself like she thought I might collapse. "The house," she said carefully, enunciating each word, "on Riverside Drive." My heart hammered so violently I could feel the pulse in my throat. "What house?" I heard myself say, I don't have a house. Catherine stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. I could see her mind working, calculating timelines and possibilities, sorting through lies. Emma tugged my sleeve. Mom, she whispered, do we have a house? I looked down at her. Hope shone in her eyes, and it physically hurt to see. I swallowed hard. No, sweetheart. I said gently, we don't. Catherine's face went completely still, and when my grandmother went still, it usually meant something was about to break. She stepped closer, but not toward me, toward Emma. She crouched down in front of my daughter, which shocked me more than anything else. Catherine Monroe did not crouch for anyone. She sat in chairs worth more than I earned in months and expected the world to adjust around her. But there she was, lowering herself to my child's height. You're Emma, right? She asked softly. Yes, Emma whispered, suddenly shy. Catherine's expression softened just slightly. That's a beautiful name. Then her eyes lifted back to mine, and all the softness vanished, replaced by steel. Get in the car, she said. I blinked. Grandmother, get in the car, she repeated, and her tone allowed zero room for negotiation. Heat flooded my face. Anger, embarrassment, relief, everything tangled together until I couldn't separate the threads. Catherine opened the back door of the sedan and waited. I hesitated. Emma looked up at me with those steady eyes. Mom, she said quietly, it's okay. The fact that my 6-year-old was comforting me shattered whatever resistance I had left. I nodded. Okay. Emma climbed into the back seat first, clutching her oversized backpack like a life raft, and I slid in beside her, half expecting someone to tap my shoulder and tell me this was all a mistake. As soon as the door shut, the silence felt expensive. Catherine didn't start driving immediately. She just sat there, both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Then she spoke, her voice terrifyingly calm. By tonight, she said, I will know who did this. My stomach dropped. She turned her head to look at me directly, and I swallowed hard. Grandmother, I don't understand what's happening. No, she agreed. You don't, and that tells me everything I need to know. She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and said clearly, call Marcus. A man answered quickly, Miss Monroe, this is Catherine, she said. Get the property manager for Riverside Drive on the line immediately. I want simple answers. Who has the keys? Who is currently living there? And has anyone been collecting rental income from that property? My blood turned to ice. Rental income. I stared at her profile, at the rigid set of her jaw, at the calm precision in her voice, as if she were ordering coffee instead of detonating my understanding of reality. That's when I realized I wasn't just embarrassed anymore. I was standing at the edge of something much, much darker. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier whether I'd ever end up living in a shelter with my daughter, I would have laughed. Not because I thought it couldn't happen to anyone, but because I thought it couldn't happen to me. That's dangerous arrogance, by the way. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall echo louder. 6 months earlier, I was still working as a nursing assistant at Memorial Medical Center. 12-hour shifts, coal lights ringing like slot machines, people asking me for things I didn't have. Time answers miracles. I was exhausted, but I was surviving. And then I moved in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary. It always starts that way, doesn't it? My father, Thomas, had that calm, reasonable voice that people instinctively believed. My mother, Patricia, had that soft smile that made everything sound like a favor, even when she was cutting you down. These days, I call them by their first names. Mom and Dad stopped fitting. You can stay with us until you get back on your feet, Patricia had said. Emma needs stability. Family supports family. I should have heard the fine print hiding beneath those words, but I didn't. At first, it was tolerable. My parents' apartment was cramped, but we made it work. Emma slept in my childhood bedroom. I worked. I contributed what I could. I kept my head down. Then the comments started. Not big, obvious attacks, little ones, the kind that don't sound like cruelty when you try explaining them later. "You're always so tired," Patricia would say with concern that felt like criticism. "Maybe you should organize your life better." Thomas would sigh when Emma's toys cluttered the floor. "We're just trying to keep things nice here." Then one night, after I dragged myself home from a double shift with my feet screaming and my brain half dead, Patricia sat down at the kitchen table like she was about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. "We need to talk," she said. I already knew that tone. It lived in my nightmares. "We think it's time you became independent," she said softly, as if softness made the words less brutal. "You've been here long enough. I'm trying," I said, keeping my voice even despite the panic rising in my chest. "Rent is expensive, deposits. You're a mother." Patricia interrupted. "If you're a good mother, you'll figure it out." The words hit me so hard I actually looked around, certain someone else must have spoken them. Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. 30 days, he said. "That's reasonable. We're not monsters." I wanted to scream, but screaming never helped in that apartment. It just gave them ammunition later. So I nodded. "Okay." And I tried. God, I tried. I scrolled through rental listings during my breaks at the hospital, thumbs moving frantically while I gulped cafeteria coffee that tasted like regret. I called places. I heard the same response over and over. First month, last month, security deposit, proof of income, credit check. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Every day felt like running uphill with Emma strapped to my back, and the hill kept getting steeper. Then came the night they decided 30 days was actually just a suggestion. I came home after midnight following a late shift. I'd helped a confused elderly patient back into bed 3 times, cleaned up a spilled meal tray, and held a frightened woman's hand while she cried about her upcoming surgery. When I reached my parents' apartment, the hallway light was on. My stomach tightened immediately. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door, my boxes. I stared at them for a long moment, my brain refusing to accept what I was seeing. Then I tried the doorknob, locked. I knocked, silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door cracked open a few inches. Patricia's face appeared, calm as if this were a perfectly normal Tuesday evening. "You need to keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "The neighbors? Why are my things outside?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. Thomas's voice drifted from somewhere behind her, bored and detached. "We told you, Olivia. Independence. It hasn't been 30 days. I said, anger breaking through. Patricia's expression hardened just slightly. Plans change. I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. Emma was curled up on the floor near the shoe rack, her little jacket folded under her head like a makeshift pillow, half asleep with her shoes still on. They'd placed her there hours ago, so I could scoop her up and disappear without disturbing anyone. "Where are we supposed to go?" I hissed. Patricia's smile returned, thin and satisfied. "You'll figure it out," she said. "You always do." Then, as if she were doing me a tremendous favor, she added, "Don't make a scene." I stood there in that hallway with my boxes, the air buzzing in my ears like static. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch down and slide my arms under Emma. She made a tiny, sleepy sound and automatically wrapped herself around my neck. As I backed out into the hallway, Patricia's hand was already pushing the door closed. The lock clicked into place immediately. Emma stood against my shoulder. "Mom, it's okay. I lied on instinct. We're having a sleepover." I shoved the boxes into my car and drove. I don't remember most of that night clearly. I remember streetlights blurring past. I remember the way my hands shook on the steering wheel. I remember sitting in the car with Emma asleep across the back seat, her small body curled like a question mark. I remember thinking over and over, how did this happen? The next day, I tried to fix it because that's what I do. I fix things. I clean up messes. I lift people who can't lift themselves. I called Patricia. She didn't answer. I called Thomas. He answered once, "We're doing this because we love you." He said like he was reading from a script, "Tough love." Then he hung up. I went to work anyway because the rent I didn't have wasn't going to pay itself. By day 3, my cheeks were hollow from stress, and my stomach hurt from cheap gas station food. I tried a motel, 1 night, 2 nights, then the money evaporated. A school counselor noticed Emma was unusually quiet and asked if everything was okay. I lied. Then she asked again, more gently, and I saw Emma watching me with those huge eyes, learning from me how to lie to survive. So I told the truth. 2 days later, I was filling out shelter intake forms while Emma sat beside me, swinging her legs. The intake worker was kind but exhausted, like she'd witnessed too much suffering to process anymore. "We need your information," she said. "We need to know where you stayed last night." "In my car," I said quietly. She nodded like she was checking a box on a form. Emma leaned toward me and whispered too loudly, "Is this our house now?" The woman flinched. I smiled too hard. "No," I said quickly. "No, sweetheart." I wanted to add that it was temporary, but the word tasted like a cruel joke. That night, Emma fell asleep on a narrow bed beside me in a room that smelled like industrial bleach and overcooked food. I lay awake listening to the sounds of other families behind paper. Thin walls, coughing, babies crying, someone whispering, "It's okay, it's okay." Over and over like a desperate prayer, my phone sat in my hand. I thought about calling Catherine. My grandmother wasn't the kind of woman you called to cry. She was the kind of woman you called when you needed a problem solved with surgical precision. But my mother had spent years training me not to bother her. "Your grandmother hates drama," Patricia always said. "She doesn't tolerate weakness. Don't embarrass yourself." When I texted Patricia after the lockout asking if Catherine knew what was happening, she responded instantly. It was incredible how fast my mother could answer a text when she wanted something. "Grandmother is overseas. She's very busy. Don't drag her into this." So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself I didn't want to look pathetic. I told myself a lot of comforting lies. And then, on a freezing winter morning, my grandmother stepped out of a black sedan outside a shelter and asked me why I wasn't living in my house on Riverside Drive. That's when I realized I didn't just have a housing problem. I had a family problem, and someone had been lying for a very long time. Back in the sedan, Catherine's call was already in progress. I only heard her side of the conversation, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. "Who signed for the keys?" A pause, and "The house is currently occupied." My stomach dropped. Catherine didn't react like someone surprised. She reacted like someone confirming what she'd already suspected. "Send the complete file to Marcus," she said crisply. "Everything." She ended the call and finally looked at me, not with pity, with certainty. I sent one text to Emma's school with thumbs that wouldn't stop shaking. "Family emergency. Emma won't be in today. No explanation, no essay. Just the truth in the smallest, least humiliating package I could manage." Catherine drove us to a diner 10 minutes away, the kind of place with warm glowing windows, a bell on the door, and menus that smelled like maple syrup. Inside, the heater blasted my face so hard I almost cried from the shock of being warm. We slid into a booth. Emma immediately found the kids' menu and started coloring a cartoon pancake like it had personally offended her. Catherine ordered hot chocolate for Emma without asking her preference. I watched her do it and felt a strange wave of anger, not at Catherine, at the universe, because it was that easy to be kind, and my parents had deliberately chosen everything else. Catherine lifted her phone again. "Grandmother," I started, then stopped because I had no idea what I was even asking. "What house? Why are you here? How did my life become a shelter sign?" Catherine didn't answer my unspoken questions in the order my panic demanded. She just said calmly, "I'm going to make another call. You'll listen and you won't interrupt." I nodded. It was the kind of nod you give a surgeon when you're already on the operating table. She tapped her screen and put the phone on speaker. One rang, two. Then my mother's voice filled the space between us. Patricia speaking, bright and sweet, like she was auditioning for the role of loving parent in a community theater production. "Patricia, it's Catherine," my grandmother said, her tone pleasant, almost gentle. "I was thinking about Olivia. How is she doing?" I felt my stomach plummet into my shoes. There was a microsecond of silence, the tiniest pause where a liar decides which version of reality serves them best. Then Patricia answered smoothly, confidently, like she'd rehearsed the sentence in front of a mirror. "Oh, she's doing wonderfully," she said. "She's living in the house. She's completely settled. She loves it. You know, Olivia, she wanted space and independence, so we didn't bother you with the details." I stared at the sticky diner table as if it might open up and swallow me whole. Across from me, Emma colored quietly, humming to herself. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. She glanced up once, saw my face, and went right back to coloring harder, like she could erase the problem through sheer determination. Patricia kept talking, filling the silence with cheerful nonsense. How busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family is everything. Catherine let her continue. Catherine never rushed liars. She gave them plenty of rope to hang themselves properly. Finally, Catherine said, "That's good to hear," and ended the call just like that. No confrontation, no accusation, no dramatic reveal. My throat tightened with something between rage and devastation. "So she knew," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter. She knew the entire time. Catherine's eyes stayed locked on mine, steady and sharp. She knew enough to lie without hesitation, she said. "That tells me what I need to know." Emma slid her coloring page toward me. "Mom, look, I made the pancake purple." I forced a smile so quickly it probably looked painful. "Wow, I managed. That pancake is incredibly brave." Emma giggled, and for half a second my chest unclenched. Then Catherine leaned in, lowered her voice, and said the sentence I should have heard months ago. "I arranged a house for you," she said, "on Riverside Drive. Your parents were supposed to manage the handoff. Keys, move-in arrangements, all of it. They told me it was done." My brain struggled to process the words. A house for us, and my parents had been living their lives like that sentence didn't exist. I gripped the edge of the booth until my knuckles went white. "Why wouldn't you tell me directly?" I heard myself ask and immediately felt stupid, like I was blaming the only person who'd actually shown up. Catherine didn't flinch, "Because I trusted your parents," she said simply, "which was my mistake, not yours." Then she stood up, walked a few steps away so Emma couldn't hear, and made 2 quick calls. Low voice, clipped, efficient. I only caught pieces: Riverside file, complete summary, key log, listing history, tenant payment records, yes, today. When she returned, she didn't sit down like she planned to linger. She sat down like she planned to move. "You're not going back to that shelter," she said. My pride tried to stand up and argue. My exhaustion shoved it back down hard. "Okay," I whispered, which was the most honest word I'd said all day. An hour later, Emma was bouncing on a hotel bed like it was a trampoline, and the world had never been cruel. She found the complimentary soap, sniffed it dramatically, and announced it smelled like a fancy grandmother. Catherine stood by the window, phone in hand, watching traffic like she was studying a battlefield. She didn't tell me everything. She didn't have to. The point wasn't details yet. The point was that something was happening, and I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. That night, after Emma fell asleep in clean sheets with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Catherine sat at the small table by the window and finally spoke again. "Your parents are hosting an event," she said. "Very important to them. A venue, extended family, speeches, the whole performance." My stomach tightened when Catherine's gaze stayed fixed on the city lights outside. "Soon," she said, "and we'll be there." She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a decision already made by the universe itself. 3 days later, I stood in the hotel bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a version of me that had been put through a washing machine and hung up to dry in a hurricane. Catherine had insisted I buy a dress, not an expensive one, just a clean one, a simple one. You don't need armor, she'd said. You need dignity. I wasn't sure dignity came in polyester, but I appreciated the sentiment. Emma wore a little blue dress and tights. She twirled once in the hotel room and declared, "I look like a princess." "You do," I said, and my throat tightened painfully. On the ride over, my stomach twisted so violently I thought I might actually vomit. "What if I freeze?" I asked quietly. Catherine didn't look at me. "Then I'll speak. What if they deny everything?" "They will," Catherine said evenly. "What if everyone thinks I'm—" I stopped because I didn't even have a word for it. Catherine glanced at me then, her gaze sharp but steady. "Olivia," she said, "you've survived worse than a room full of liars." The car pulled up outside a venue I'd never have chosen in my entire life. One of those hotel event spaces with soft lighting and hard smiles everywhere you looked. The sign by the entrance read, "Monroe Family Dinner." Of course it did. My mother loved an event, not because she liked people, but because she liked witnesses. Inside, there were relatives I hadn't seen in months. Aunts, uncles, cousins. People with opinions and casseroles, except the casseroles had been replaced by catered hors d'oeuvres served on trays like tiny edible bribes. At the far end of the room stood a projector screen and a microphone, because my mother couldn't serve dinner without also serving a carefully crafted narrative. Before we went in, Catherine stopped at a side door and spoke briefly to a staff member. The woman nodded and opened a small private room adjacent to the banquet hall. Quiet, warm, stocked with water bottles and crackers. "This is for Emma," Catherine said. "She doesn't need to be in the center of this." Emma took one cautious step into the room, then looked up at Catherine seriously. "Do I get snacks?" "Yes," Catherine said. "Good ones." Emma accepted that like it was legally binding. A trusted assistant stayed with her. Emma waved at me, completely unaware she was being protected from a family apocalypse. Then Catherine looked at me. "You go in first," she said. I understood what she was doing. Let them see me before they saw her. Let them panic in silence. I walked into the banquet room alone. The chatter softened, then resumed the way people do when they sense something off but don't want to be the first to acknowledge it. Then Patricia saw me. Her smile appeared automatically, then glitched like a bad internet connection. Her eyes swept over my dress, my posture, the fact that I wasn't wearing "I'm drowning" on my face anymore. Her hands tightened slightly around her wine glass. Thomas noticed a second later. His laugh died halfway through. His jaw clenched like he was biting down on a thought he couldn't afford to speak. Neither of them moved toward me. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't ask how Emma was doing. They did what people do when they're trying to calculate danger. They smiled and waited. I stood near the edge of the room and let the silence do its work. Sometimes dry humor is the only thing that keeps you from screaming. So I let myself have one thought. Look at us. A family dinner, the kind where everyone pretends the most important thing is the seating arrangement. A minute later, the room temperature changed. Catherine Monroe entered, calm, unhurried, completely in control. Beside her walked a man with a slim folder and a laptop bag. The kind of person who looked like he'd never raised his voice in his life because he didn't need to. Patricia went pale. Not "oh, you surprised me," pale. More like "I just realized my entire plan has a catastrophic hole in it," pale. Thomas straightened his shoulders the way he did when he wanted to look like the victim before anyone had even accused him of anything. Catherine nodded politely to a few relatives like she was simply attending dinner. Then she looked at my mother. "Patricia," Catherine said lightly, "before we eat, I'd like to clear up something you told me." My mother's smile tightened. "Of course, Catherine." Catherine's voice stayed perfectly calm. You told me Olivia was living in the house on Riverside Drive, she said. The room quieted, not because everyone suddenly cared about Riverside Drive, but because everyone suddenly cared about Patricia's face. Patricia's eyes darted. She set her wine glass down as if it had suddenly become too heavy. Well, she said, laughing too fast. Yes, she. Catherine held up one hand. Let's not do this with guessing, she said. Let's do it with facts. She nodded to the man with the laptop. He stepped forward and plugged into the venue's projector system like he'd done it 1,000 times. The first slide appeared. Riverside Drive property summary. A murmur ran through the room. Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Catherine didn't speak like she was delivering a courtroom speech. She spoke like she was reading the weather forecast. This house was arranged for Olivia and Emma, she said, and the screen showed a simple document line to match. Next slide. Keys released to Patricia Monroe. July. Catherine let that information sit for half a second. Then another slide appeared. A rental listing screenshot. The Riverside house marketed as a furnished rental property. Photos of the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. People leaned forward in their seats. Patricia's hands started to shake visibly. Next came a lease summary. Names blurred for privacy. Dates clearly visible. Tenants moved in. August. And then the slide that made the entire room go dead silent. A payment instruction document from the property manager's file. Rental income pay, out account provided by Patricia and Thomas. Catherine's voice didn't rise even slightly. Patricia, she said, you didn't just take the keys. She looked around the room, making absolutely certain everyone heard the next sentence. You rented out the home meant for my granddaughter and great-granddaughter, and you had the rental income sent to an account you controlled. Thomas snapped first, loud, trying desperately to take back control of the room. This is completely inappropriate. He barked. This is a family event. Catherine turned her gaze to him with the precision of a scalpel. Yes, she said. That's exactly why I'm doing it here. Patricia found her voice, thin and frantic. We were going to tell her, she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. It was temporary, we needed. Temporary, Catherine repeated, her tone ice, cold. Her eyes flicked toward the side room where Emma was, unseen but present. You displaced a child, Catherine said, and the room went absolutely still. She paused just long enough for the weight to settle, then finished the sentence for profit. Someone gasped audibly. Someone else whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Patricia started crying. Real tears this time, streaming down her face. We had debts. She sobbed. You don't understand the pressure. Catherine's expression didn't change by a millimeter. I understand enough, she said, and I'm done funding your choices. She turned slightly so everyone in the room could hear clearly and said simply, starting immediately, Patricia and Thomas received nothing from me. No more assistance, no more transfers, no inheritance. Thomas's face twisted with rage and panic. You can't, I can, Catherine said, and I already did. The man with the folder stepped forward, perfectly calm. Patricia Monroe, Thomas Monroe, he said politely, these documents are for you. A uniformed officer stood nearby. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just present, because Catherine didn't gamble with scenes like this. Patricia stared at the papers like they were radioactive. Thomas took them with shaking hands, then looked around the room and finally understood the worst part. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reputation collapsing in public. Catherine's voice stayed absolutely level. You will not contact Olivia, she said. You will cooperate fully and you will answer for what you did. Patricia turned to me then, eyes wild with desperation. Olivia, she begged. Tell her to stop. We're family. Something inside me went cold and perfectly clear. You should have remembered that. I said quietly, before you made a business out of my daughter's home. Patricia's face crumpled completely. I didn't feel joy exactly. I felt relief. Relief that the truth was finally spoken out loud. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that Emma would never have to learn how to smile through humiliation the way I had. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I walked out of the banquet room, down the hallway, and opened the door to the private room. Emma looked up, cheeks full of crackers. "Mom, are we done?" I crouched down and hugged her so tightly she squeaked. "Yeah," I whispered, "we're done." She leaned back and looked at my face carefully, like she was checking for storms. Then she asked softly, "Can we go home?" I swallowed hard. Yes. I said, "We can." Catherine met us in the hallway. She didn't look back at the room behind us. She didn't need to. In the car, Emma leaned against my shoulder and fell asleep almost immediately. I stared out the window, hands still trembling slightly. "Grandmother," I whispered, "what happens now?" Catherine didn't take her eyes off the road. "Now," she said, "we take back what was meant for you. 6 months later, our life is boring in the absolute best way possible. We live on Riverside Drive now. Emma has her own room, her own curtains, and a crooked art gallery of drawings taped to the wall. She walks to school like the world has always been safe. That's the entire point. I'm still a nursing assistant by choice now, not because I'm stuck. I'm finishing my registered nurse training one step at a time, and for the first time in years, my energy goes into building a future instead of just surviving the present. Catherine never paid for my life. She showed up when it mattered most, and she made absolutely certain no one could ever intercept help again. Sunday mornings, she visits with pastries and pretends she's only here to see Emma. Emma doesn't buy it for a second. "Grandma Catherine," she'll ask, "do you like our house?" Catherine always pauses like she's swallowing something heavy. Then she says, "Yes, I do." As for Patricia and Thomas, it turns out you can't rent out someone else's home. Collect the money and keep calling it family. The rental income they took didn't stay free. They were forced to repay it, and the investigation that followed made their carefully maintained respectable image evaporate overnight. Once Catherine cut them off completely, their hidden debts showed up like roaches under a suddenly flipped light switch. People stopped inviting them places. Calls stopped getting returned. My mother tried to contact me once, not to apologize, to negotiate. I blocked the number because I'm done bargaining for basic human decency. So what do you think? Did Catherine do the right thing, or did she go too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more.